What are the results from love being opposite to faith when one comes in conflict of duty and then desire? How does the homes that used to be warm start suffocating you? Some stories whisper rebellion, others scream it. But disobedience does something even more powerful. It lets it simmer in the stolen glances, the unsaid words, and the weight of a love that was never meant to be. Welcome to a world where love is not only forbidden, but erased. This is Disobedience. Ronit Krushka has created a life in New York, a life of freedom, a life where she doesn't have to give an account of who she is. She is a photographer, a chronicler of life, yet always just beyond its grasp. But when she receives the news of her father's passing, the revered Rav Krushka, a towering figure in their Orthodox Jewish community, she is pulled back to a world that never really let her go. This is not just a visit. This is a reckoning. The taxi stops. Ronit steps out, luggage in hand. She looks around at the quiet, tightly packed rows of houses. Ronit approaches a humble, orderly house. She hesitates and then knocks. The door opens. David Alessandro Nivola stands in the doorway, his eyes unreadable. Around his eyes, shock darts, soon swallowed behind something more considered. Hesitation. Uncertainty. A premeditated, polite warmth, but not the warmth itself. David, her childhood friend. Her father's chosen disciple. The man expected to take his place. The community holds him in high regard. He is steady, dependable, faithful. Everything Ronit was not. For a moment, they just stand there, neither knowing what to say. Ronit manages a small, almost awkward smile. David clears his throat, stepping aside to let her in. Inside of the house, in complete silence, almost to an uncomfortable level, shadows stretching lengthily over walls, thick in the air smells of candles and worn books, and something else, perhaps sorrow, echoes of a man who once stood tall. And then, a presence. Estey steps into the room, played by incomparable Rachel McAdams. Their eyes meet. The air shifts, charged with something unspoken, something neither of them has dared to name for years. Estey, the reason she left, the love she was forced to forget, the past she has spent years trying to bury. Estey says nothing. For one instant, the room shrinks, the years dissolving between them. Ronit forgets to breathe, almost. David stands between them. He clears his throat. The moment breaks. Estey looks away. Ronit straightens. Estey is not the same girl Ronit left behind. There is something different in her now. Something restrained, measured. A woman who has learned to live within the confines of expectation. Late evening, Ronit steps into her old childhood bedroom. It is a lot smaller than what she remembered. Stale, as if something in it died some time back. She traces her fingers across the wooden dresser, where remains of her past continue to exist. A thick pile of dusty books, a discarded old hairbrush, a mirror reflecting someone else, a stranger. She wouldn't know for sure. The next morning, Ronit walks through the neighborhood. She passes a group of women talking in hushed tones. Their conversation stops the moment they notice her. One of them forces a tight, polite smile. The others simply watch, their judgment silent but heavy. She is an outsider. She always will be. At the synagogue, the men are all inside, discussing plans for the memorial. Among them, David nods, listening. Outside, Ronit pauses, peering in. The world that was her father's is intact, still flourishing, without her. She had thought she had escaped this world, that she had left it all behind. But now, as she sat in the very place she swore she would never set foot in again, she realized the past had been waiting all this time. A knock at the door. Ronit looks up, startled. She wasn't expecting anyone. She hesitates before standing and crossing the room. She opens the door. Estey stands there, framed in the doorway, her expression unreadable. At first, their interactions are measured, cautious. But something lingers beneath the surface. Something undeniable. A moment of hesitation, Estey's hand brushing against Ronit's. A pause that lasts too long. Ronit exhales, her heart pounding in a way she hasn't felt in years. Estey is no longer the carefree girl that Ronit remembered. She now is Mrs. David, duty-bound and faith-bound. But is she happy? Or does she merely exist? Estey speaks first, her voice soft. She asks about New York, about Ronit's photography, about her life, her freedom. The words are polite, distant, but her eyes betray her. Ronit looks at her for a long time before asking the question that really matters. Are you happy? Estey freezes. The question hangs between them like a blade, and then she smiles, a small, sad thing, carefully measured. I'm a good wife, she says, but that is not an answer. Happiness. Such a simple word, but here, in this world, it is a luxury. And then, Estey exhales, a breath she has been holding for years. She does not have to say it. Ronit already knows. They reach a quiet park. Estey hesitates, looking around. There is no one else here, just them. The world feels smaller, more intimate. Estey speaks. I used to dream about you. Her voice is barely above a whisper. In that moment, the world outside does not exist. Only them. Only this. The hesitation shatters, and then the inevitable. A kiss. It is not soft. It is not hesitant. It is years of repression, of longing, of desperate, aching need crashing all at once. Estey steps back, wraps her arms around herself as if holding something in. I should go, she says. Ronit sits alone, staring out the window. The city stretches before her, vast and unknowable. But her thoughts are not here. They are with Estey, always with Estey. Secrets can't stay secrets for very long. Not here, not when the community relishes in everything traditional and its people in their blind obedience. And to Estey, expectations are suffocating. Estey at the sink, washing dishes in slow, conscious motions. She says nothing. Her body is there, but her mind is elsewhere. David watches her, his fingers tapping lightly against the table. He notices the way she stares out the window, lost in thought, the way she barely responds when he speaks. He clears his throat. Estey, he says gently. She turns, startled. In her eyes now, something circumspect, something unreadable. David searches for words, but the words do not come. David notices it, the way she drifts, the way she lingers when looking at Ronit, in the way no longer seeming a part of their life built so well together. Later in bed, David lies awake, staring at the ceiling. In this community, faith is not just belief. It is a way of life, a way of being. To question it is to question everything. And Estey? Estey is beginning to question. Estey walks through the marketplace, her head covered, her hands clutching the straps of her bag. She feels their eyes. She feels their quiet, polite smiles masking curiosity, concern, disapproval. David is not the villain of this story. He is a man who believes in faith, in duty. But love is not something that can be dictated. And Estey? Estey has spent her entire life doing what is expected of her. David takes a sharp intake of breath, as if the words physically strike him. He looks at her, really looks at her, and sees the truth in her eyes. I tried, Estey continues, her voice trembling. I tried to be who I was supposed to be the wife you needed, to be the woman this community wanted me to be. A long silence stretches between them, and then finally, David nods once, a slow, painful acceptance. Later that night, Estey sits by herself in the bedroom, looking at herself in the mirror. And then, slowly, her fingers grasping the edges of her wig. A powerful moment, Estey removing her wig, her hair falling freely for the first time. This is not a story of victory or defeat. It is not about who was right and who was wrong. It's about choice, about identity, about breaking free from the expectations that seek to define us. Estey does not choose Ronit. Ronit does not stay. But both of them choose themselves. And maybe that is the greatest love of all. Across town, Ronit stands framed against the window of her hotel room, taking in the London skyline. She turns away from the window, walking toward her suitcase. She packs with slow, deliberate movements. This time she is not running. She is simply leaving. For the first time in years, she is at peace with her past, and more importantly, she is at peace with leaving it behind. There is no perfect ending here, no grand reunion, no certainty. Meanwhile, back in their community, life continues. The synagogue doors open for evening prayer. At the airport, Ronit waits for her flight. The terminal buzzes with activity, but she feels strangely calm. A chapter is closing, and she is ready to turn the page. Estey and Ronit were never meant to fit within the lines drawn for them. Their love was never meant to be written in the pages of the life they were given. But in the end, love was not the point. Freedom was. Not all stories have perfect endings, but maybe, just maybe, the best ones don't need to. At its heart, Disobedience isn't just a love story. It's a story of identity, of faith, of the quiet ways we rebel and the quiet ways we break free. It is about the weight of expectation, the burden of tradition, and the inevitable cost of self-discovery. But maybe faith is not about knowing. Maybe it is about trusting in God, in life, in the people we love, even when they leave. It asks, do we belong to our faith, our family, or to ourselves? With that said, thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this recap, please hit like, subscribe, and the bell icon for more sapphic love stories. See you again, here on Sapphic Nook.